Are you complete now? Good morning, everybody. Are you complete?
Not yet po, Doc.
Good morning, everybody. Our topic for this morning is to orient you and talk with you about hormone secretion of the placenta. And this will be the outline of my presentation this morning. I will talk about protein hormones, followed by steroid hormones, and then talk about fetal adrenal gland interaction and placental interaction. So the protein placental hormones are the following that are listed here: your human chorionic gonadotropin, human placental lactogen, and other placental protein hormones like chorionic adrenocorticotropin, hypothalamic-like releasing hormones, corticotropin releasing hormone, relaxin, leptin, inhibin, growth hormone variant, gonadotropin releasing hormone, growth hormone releasing hormone, parathyroid hormone-related protein, neuropeptide 1, and activin. Observe that placental hormones, some of the placental hormones are also secreted by the anterior pituitary gland, as well as some by the ovaries like inhibin and activin. Let me talk first about the human chorionic gonadotropin. It's a protein hormone, and I will describe with you or for you the human chorionic gonadotropin. It's a pregnancy hormone. In fact, its detection in blood or urine almost always indicates a pregnancy, an ongoing pregnancy, whether it is intrauterine or outside of the uterine cavity. Its biological activity is similar to luteinizing hormone of the anterior pituitary gland, but human chorionic gonadotropin is exclusively and majority of which is produced by the placenta, although some may be produced, negligible amounts may be produced by the fetal kidney or by malignant tumors, as I will cite later on, and among non-pregnant women and men, because as I said, it is similar to luteinizing hormone and therefore secreted by the anterior pituitary gland of both sexes. Human chorionic gonadotropin is a glycoprotein. As you can see here, the plasma half-life is 36 hours. Please remember most especially that it is structurally related to luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, and thyroid stimulating hormone, because HCG, LH, FSH, and TSH have a common alpha subunit. I repeat, they have a common alpha subunit. And the difference between them in terms of human chorionic gonadotropin is its beta subunit. Now, where is human chorionic gonadotrophin synthesized, of course, in the placental syncytiothropoblast and cytotrophoblast. Literature abounds in evidence that you can, before the 5th week post-implantation, the thropoblasts are already secreting or synthesizing HCG. And if you assay it in the first trimester, then it can easily be assayed in the urine or in the plasma. Looking at this graph, you will realize the peak of concentration of human chorionic gonadotrophin. And you can see here that about before the 10th week of pregnancy or 60 to 80 days after menses, you will now find a peak of human chorionic gonadotrophin rise. And then it goes down. So as you can see, by the 16th week of pregnancy, it's practically negligible, although present in the human placenta. It may no longer be detectable in urine or in plasma. So look at this graph, because I will differentiate for you later on the graph of human chorionic gonadotrophin, the other placental hormone, human placental lactogen, and chorionic releasing hormone. But let me go first with human chorionic gonadotrophin. As I said earlier, the the molecule of human chorionic gonadotrophin contains the alpha and the beta subunit. The alpha subunit continues increasing gradually and steadily until they plateau at about the 36 weeks of gestation. But the beta subunit, which is peculiar to human chorionic gonadotrophin and from which it differs from LH, FSH, and DSH, is limited in its concentration, reaching its maximal level at 8 to 10 weeks of human gestation. How do you know and when do you assay human chorionic gonadotrophin in maternal serum? Please remember the important fact that human chorionic gonadotrophin enters the maternal blood at the time of blastocyst implantation. These trophoblasts, both syncytio and cytotrophoblast, particularly in early pregnancy, the cytotrophoblast, will start secreting HCG, so that 7 to 9 days after the mid-cycle surge of luteinizing hormone, it can already be detected in maternal serum or plasma. It doubles in 2 days. So you will see now if there is normal development of the human embryo and placenta, because the HCG level will be double in value every 2 days. Put into your mind the peak maternal plasma levels of human chorionic gonadotrophin, which is 100,000 milli-international units per ml. And you see this peak level between the 60th and 80th days after menses. Please remember this, peak maternal levels, 100,000 milli-international units per ml. Peak time is 60th and 80th day after menses and on to the 10th week, and reaches its lowest level by the 16th week of gestation, as you can see here, peaking at 60 to 80 days after menses, then drops down and becomes nadir in its level by the 16th week of human gestation. Remember that I have mentioned that the beta-core fragment is the one that we detect by our pregnancy test, both in the urine and in the serum. And the concentration and pattern of secretion and detection in the urine is the same as that of maternal plasma. You are very familiar with urinary pregnancy test kit. Please remember that the pregnancy test kit that we use for early pregnancy detection utilizes the beta subunit antibody. Okay? And please remember that it is peculiar to the molecule of human chorionic gonadotrophin. Now, what regulates the synthesis and clearance of human chorionic gonadotrophin? Placental and pituitary gonadotrophin releasing hormone. So placenta, particularly the cytotrophoblast, releases gonadotrophin releasing hormone that regulates thropoblastic synthesis of human chorionic gonadotrophin. And it is also regulated by activin and inhibin, inhibin being inhibitory as the word describes, and activin is stimulatory in terms of gonadotrophin regulation for human chorionic gonadotrophin. It is cleared 70% by the liver and 30% by the kidneys. Now, what is the function of human chorionic gonadotrophin? Okay. Now, if you look at these figures, you will see the biological features of or function of human chorionic gonadotrophin. And I would like you to know them also by heart in much the same way that I would like you to remember at heart the peak level and the peak time when human chorionic gonadotrophin assay can be assayed both in maternal plasma and maternal urine. So the functions of human chorionic gonadotrophin are the following. It is important for the rescue and maintenance of the corpus luteum function, thereby with progressive progesterone production. Remember that in the first, that after fertilization, that the lifespan of the corpus luteum of menstruation is 9 to 11 days. And after that, it regresses and the progesterone level in the blood drops down so that the endometrium finally becomes deciduated and menstruation occurs. But when the woman gets pregnant, or the ovum is fertilized at day 14, the corpus luteum of menstruation is converted into the corpus luteum of pregnancy, continuing secretion of progesterone until the placenta is able to take over progesterone production, which is necessary for the maintenance of the pregnancy. It is also responsible for stimulation of fetal testosterone secretion, stimulation of maternal thyroid gland, and promotion of uterine vascular vasodilatation and myometrial smooth muscle relaxation. Okay, as you can see here, why is important, particularly to remember number 3, there are some patients who might manifest symptoms of hyperthyroidism, but these are transient. It is because the human chorionic gonadotrophin can stimulate the maternal thyroid gland. Remember also that human chorionic gonadotrophin is very important for smooth muscle relaxation via promotion of relaxin secretion by the corpus luteum. So again, I repeat, these are the 4 functions of human chorionic gonadotrophin, and I would like to request you to know them by heart. Now look at this, because we talked about this when we talked about the ovarian and endometrial cycle. And this is going back to the corpus luteum of menstruation. As I said earlier, the lifespan of the corpus luteum is 9 to 11 days. But when fertilization occurs, the corpus luteum continues to function. It becomes the corpus luteum of pregnancy because HCG rescues the corpus luteum. So it does not lyse, and HCG rescues the corpus luteum so that it becomes the corpus luteum of pregnancy, continually secreting progesterone to allow implantation and maintenance of the pregnancy while the placenta is still unable to secrete enough progesterone. Okay, you can see that corpus luteum of pregnancy. So how about now the function of fetal testicular testosterone secretion? Remember that before the 110th day of pregnancy, the fetal anterior pituitary gland is not yet vascularized. So it does not have enough luteinizing hormone secretion to maintain and allow secretion of testosterone from the interstitial cells of Leydig. So because the fetal anterior pituitary gland is not yet able to do that, human chorionic gonadotrophin secreted by the syncytio and cytotrophoblast acts as a luteinizing hormone surrogate to stimulate Leydig cell replication and testosterone synthesis, which is necessary to promote male sexual differentiation. Therefore, as when the HCG level falls, as I said, it reaches its nadir by the 16th week of pregnancy, pituitary luteinizing hormone already maintains testicular stimulation and secretion. So there are certain conditions in pregnancy where the level of human chorionic gonadotrophin may be beyond what is expected or less than what is expected. And you can see here that when there is a multifetal pregnancy, the placenta is huge to maintain the twin pregnancy. There is a higher level of human chorionic gonadotrophin. But even if the level is high, the graph is the same. It rises and reaches its peak by the 60th to the 80th day after menses, and then drops down in level from the 16th week onward. So the level is high, but the graph of secretion is the same as in singleton pregnancy. Elevation of human chorionic gonadotrophin is also found among fetuses suffering from Rh isoimmunization, or the so-called erythroblastosis fetalis associated with hemolytic anemia. It is found also among patients with hydatidiform mole, with choriocarcinoma, with chorioadenoma destruens or invasive mole, and we call that gestational trophoblastic disease. And it is found among pregnancies in the mid-trimester with fetuses suffering from the Down syndrome. So in these four conditions, the level of your human chorionic gonadotrophin is elevated. However, when you assay your human chorionic gonadotrophin, particularly at the time when you think that it must be at its peak level, but the level is low or it does not double every 2 days, then think about either a pregnancy that will not continue, in other words, an early pregnancy wastage or a process of abortion, or a pregnancy that is located outside of the uterine cavity, which is called ectopic pregnancy. I go now. Any questions so far on human chorionic gonadotrophin? If none, I will now go to human placental lactogen. It's another placental protein hormone. It is also known as the human growth hormone, and I will describe again this placental lactogen according to chemical characteristics, synthesis, origin, regulation, and functions, as I did with human chorionic gonadotrophin. Human placental lactogen is also known as chorionic growth hormone. Its main function is that it aids maternal adaptation to fetal energy requirements. Okay, now, it's a single non-glycosylated polypeptide chain with structural similarity to growth hormone and prolactin. Please remember, a structural similarity to growth hormone and prolactin. And remember that it's a potent lactogenic and hormone and growth hormone. So its bioactivity is simulating lactogenic and growth hormone. Oh, where is placental lactogen synthesized? Again, it is synthesized in the syncytio and trophoblast. So both human chorionic gonadotrophin and human placental lactogen are synthesized in the syncytio and cytotrophoblast. As you can see here, 5 to 10 days after fertilization or conception, it is already demonstrable in the placenta, but detectable by the 3rd week of pregnancy in the maternal serum. And much later on, the placental syncytious trophoblast continues secreting human placental lactogen. As you can see here in this graph, differentiating between human chorionic gonadotrophin. I repeat, human chorionic gonadotrophin, peak level 100 milli-international units per ml, 60th to the 80th day after menses, and then drops down to its nadir by the 16th week of pregnancy and so on till late pregnancy. However, human placental lactogen is continually secreted by the syncytial trophoblast until term, as you can see in this graph. Okay, so it differs in that matter. As you can see here, maternal plasma concentration is linked to placental mass. The greater the placental mass, the greater the plasma level of human placental lactogen. It is the greatest of any known hormones in humans, and its production is 1 gram per day. But it has a short half-life of only 10 to 30 minutes. Again, please remember the important metabolic actions of human placental lactogen. Remember, the main function of human placental lactogen is metabolic in nature. As you can see here, it promotes maternal lipolysis. It inhibits leptin secretion by term trophoblast. It aids, as I mentioned earlier, in maternal adaptation to the energy requirements of the fetus. And remember also that it's a potent angiogenic hormone serving an important function in fetal vascular formation. Let me talk first about this mode of action of placental lactogen. Remember that human placental lactogen or prolactin regulates tryptophan hydroxylase 1 enzyme, resulting in serotonin synthesis and increases beta cell proliferation. And this beta cell proliferation causes increased insulin level in pregnancy. So you might think that they might be hyperinsulinemia in pregnancy. Yes, but there is no diabetes, because you can see here that in the metabolic effects of human placental lactogen, you have increased human placental lactogen, which encourages or causes increased insulin secretion. But there is also increased insulin resistance in pregnancy, as you can see here. And because of this increased insulin resistance, there is increased breakdown of fatty acids, increased lipolysis, increased breakdown of fetal protein, releasing amino acids that are essential for fetal growth and development, and increases blood glucose. And this increased lipolysis, the increased release of fatty acids, is for maintenance and is a source of maternal energy requirements. The increased proteolysis, releasing amino acids that process the placental barrier, both the blood glucose as well as the amino acids easily cross the placental barrier to increase in glycogen and protein synthesis, which is necessary for fetal nutrition as well as for fetal growth and development. So it's a growth hormone, essentially, particularly for the fetus. So again, the placental lactogen promotes maternal lipolysis by breaking down fatty acids, thus providing an energy source for maternal metabolism and fetal nutrition. Okay? Remember that human placental lactogen inhibits leptin secretion by term trophoblast. So I would like to go back. Please remember, your maternal metabolism is influenced by your human placental lactogen. It causes increased insulin secretion, but there is also increased insulin resistance, bringing about breakdown of fatty acids, lipolysis, meeting maternal energy requirements, breaking down proteins into amino acids, going into the fetal circulation, and then the blood glucose that is released also crosses freely the placental barrier or membrane to cause fetal growth and nutrition. Now, as you can see here, increased maternal insulin resistance, as I have stated earlier in the graph, ensures nutrient flow to the fetus. It favors protein synthesis, provides readily available amino acid sources to the fetus, and to counterbalance the greater insulin resistance and prevent maternal hyperglycemia, maternal insulin is also increased, as I showed you in this graph. Remember, increased insulin secretion caused by human prolactin, but there is also increased insulin resistance, breakdown of fatty acids, breakdown of protein into amino acids, giving maternal energy sources. The blood glucose and the amino acids now provides the essential nutrition for the fetus, as you can see here. Okay, there is no diabetes or hyperglycemia in pregnancy because there is increased maternal insulin resistance. Okay. Going now to the other placental hormones, I would like to talk about the placental hormones, their origin, mechanism of action, and their functions. Now you can see here the different protein hormones produced by the placenta, aside from the two that I have mentioned. You have human chorionic gonadotropin. I said that it has structural similarity to pituitary luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, and thyroid stimulating hormone. The function primarily of human chorionic gonadotropin is that it maintains the corpus luteum of pregnancy, thus continuing secretion of progesterone until the placenta is able to assume function of progesterone secretion. It regulates fetal testis testosterone secretion, and it stimulates maternal thyroid secretion. I mentioned also human placental lactogen. It has a functional similarity to growth hormone and prolactin. It aids maternal adaptation to fetal energy requirements. Growth hormone variant, it is not found in the pituitary gland, only in the placenta, and it potentially mediates pregnancy insulin resistance. The parathyroid hormone-related releasing protein, it regulates transfer. It's only found in the placenta. It regulates transfer of calcium and other solutes, and it regulates fetal maternal homeostasis. Other protein hormones secreted by the human placenta, but is also secreted both by the male testis and the female ovaries, as you know that. So the non-placental site of expression of inhibin and activin are in the testes and in the ovaries. And what are the functions? What is the function of inhibin? It potentially inhibits fetal follicle stim. It inhibits follicle-stimulating hormone-mediated ovulation. Because of the secretion of inhibin by the human placenta, there is no anterior pituitary FSH secretion by the maternal pituitary gland. There is no development of other oocytes and no ovulation during pregnancy because inhibin potentially inhibits pituitary FSH expression, and therefore there is no ovulation. Inhibin, as I have stated earlier, also regulates human chorionic gonadotropin synthesis. On the other hand, activin has the opposite action, but it regulates placental gonadotropin releasing hormone synthesis. The other protein hormones are adrenocorticotropin. You all know that the ACTH, CRH, GnRH, TRH, and GHRH are all found in the hypothalamus. So, looking now at corticotropin releasing hormone, what are its function in pregnancy? As I said, it is released also by the trophoblast or the human placenta. It has a role in relaxation of the smooth muscle, so it helps progesterone in relaxation of the smooth muscles during pregnancy, thus preventing early pregnancy losses. It has a role, which I will be demonstrated to you when we talk about physiology of labor, the role of CRH in initiating parturition, and most importantly, corticotropin releasing hormone promotes fetal and maternal glucocorticoid production. Okay, now gonadotropin releasing hormone regulates trophoblast HCG secretion. So the cytotrophoblast releases this releasing hormone in the placenta and regulates syncytial trophoblastic function in terms of protein secretion. The function of thyrotropin releasing hormone and growth hormone releasing hormone in the placenta is unknown. Neuropeptide 1, which is found in human brain, found also and secreted by the placental trophoblast, regulates placental GnRH synthesis. So any question now on protein hormones secretion by the placenta before I go to steroid hormones? Do you have any questions so far? Okay, so I'll now discuss steroid hormone production in the placenta. Remember that the placental secretion of these hormones come from the syncytial trophoblast mainly. Okay, so I now go to the steroid hormones. Now let me just look back at steroidogenesis or formation of steroids in pregnancy. Please remember that in pregnancy, there are three compartments that aid in steroidogenesis in pregnancy. We have the maternal component, okay, which is the placental component, the decidua, okay? And the maternal component can be a source of precursors as well as clearance of steroids, as I will discuss with you later on. The fetal component is also coming from the fetal adrenal mainly. And now it is at the placental site as a function of syncytial trophoblast that steroidogenesis or synthesis of estradiol, estriol, estrone, and progesterone take place. So the maternal and fetal components for source of placental synthesis of steroids will be discussed with you subsequently. So please remember these three components in steroidogenesis in pregnancy: maternal, fetal, and placental. You can see here in this diagram that you have here the fetus, as shown by my pointer. You have here the placenta, and you have here the mother, okay? And you have here the adrenal gland. So you can see here maternal blood crosses the placenta in the form of cholesterol. The placenta converts this cholesterol into either progesterone or cholesterol enters the fetal blood, and the fetal adrenal cortex also contributes cholesterol which converts this into the hydroepiandrosterone and goes back to the placenta and is transformed into estrogen, which is released into the maternal circulation. And you can see here that from cholesterol, progesterone is also synthesized by the syncytial trophoblast and enters the maternal circulation. You will see here that the secretion of progesterone and estrogen is mainly towards the maternal circulation, as you can see the arrow here. Okay, now, so as I said and I repeat, the process of steroidogenesis consists of the fetal, placental, and maternal component. And remember especially that the major site of steroid and protein production in the placenta is the syncytial trophoblast. You can see here the rate of production of steroids in pregnancy compared to the non-pregnant women. And you can see how great the increase is in pregnancy in terms of estradiol. You can see from 0.1 to 0.6 to 15, 20, estriol remarkably increased, progesterone remarkably increased, aldosterone secretion is increased, the oxycorticosterone is increased, and cortisol remains the same. There is no change in cortisol secretion during pregnancy. And all of these changes in estrogen, progesterone, aldosterone are because of synthesis of these hormones aided by the placental syncytial trophoblast. Remember this important summary. Estrogens and progesterone are produced by the placenta. Where in the placenta? In the syncytial trophoblast. Aldosterone is produced by the maternal adrenal in response to the stimulus of angiotensin II. The oxycorticosterone is produced in extraglandular tissue sites by way of the 21-hydroxylation of plasma progesterone. Cortisol production during pregnancy is not increased even though the blood vessels are elevated, blood levels are elevated because of decreased clearance caused by increased cortisol binding globulin. As I show you here, estradiol, estriol, progesterone, aldosterone, the oxycorticosterone are all increased in pregnancy, but cortisol is not, for the reason that I have stated in this slide. Okay, so looking now in this graph at the level of progesterone, estradiol, estrone, there are four estrogen. We have estradiol, estriol, estrone, and estetrol. And these are all found in the placenta, but predominantly estradiol and estriol. Okay, you can see here that there is a progressive rise in secretion of steroids by the placenta as pregnancy progresses. And the same as you can see here, okay, this is the non-pregnant level. You see the rise in the estrone, estriol, and estradiol. There is a significant rise in progesterone until the term pregnancy is reached. So let me talk particularly about estrogen as the placental steroid hormone. And in the process of my discussion with you, I will explain the process of estrogen synthesis, describe the role of estrogen in pregnancy, discuss with you how estrogen is metabolized, and explain the role of the fetal adrenal glands in estrogen synthesis. And towards the end of the lecture, I will discuss with you how ovarian fetal conditions affect estrogen production and how various maternal conditions affect estrogen production. Okay, so far, am I okay? Now, I would like now to discuss with you and remind you again about the luteoplacental shift. Remember that in the normal non-pregnant cycle, the corpus luteum of menstruation regresses after 9 to 11 days because there is no more luteinizing hormone to maintain the life of the corpus luteum. But when the woman gets pregnant and impregnated in the 14th day of the cycle, the placenta starts to secrete human chorionic gonadotrophin, okay, to maintain the pregnancy, and starts secreting also progesterone and estrogen. So the corpus luteum of pregnancy, there is a so-called period in time when the placenta is able now to assume the function of the corpus luteum of pregnancy. And we call this the luteoplacental shift, which occurs between the 7th to the 8th week of pregnancy. As you can see in this slide, by the 7th week of human gestation, the placenta already takes over the function of the corpus luteum in terms of estrogen and progesterone production. So the corpus luteum of pregnancy is overtaken by the synthesis of estrogen and progesterone by the placental syncytial trophoblast, and this shift occurs between the 7th to the 9th week of gestation, as shown here in this graph and as shown by these words. The luteoplacental shift is from the 7th to the 9th week of human gestation, meaning that the placenta is now taking over the function of estrogen and progesterone production from the corpus luteum. The placental syncytial trophoblast takes over. Remember that normal human pregnancy is a hyperestrogenic state. Ang taas-taas ng level ng estrogen in a pregnancy state. The hyperestrogenic state of human pregnancy is one of continually increasing magnitude as pregnancy progresses, terminating abruptly after delivery, as I have shown you in this particular graph. Okay, you can see here that throughout the entire pregnancy, there is increasing level of estradiol and estrogen progesterone, and this abruptly drops down in level as soon as the fetus and the placenta are delivered. So let me now talk about placental estrogen production. Estrogen production during pregnancy reflects the unique interactions among the fetal adrenal glands, the fetal liver, the placenta, and the maternal adrenal glands. Remember the three components: maternal adrenal glands, the placenta, and the fetal adrenal glands and liver. These are the three components in the production of estrogen by the placenta. So what is the source? Okay, from acetate in the maternal circulation, it enters the placental circulation as cholesterol, converted by the placental enzyme 450-SCC into pregnenolone. Okay, in the progesterone pathway, this pregnenolone is converted by 3-beta-hydroxydehydrogenase and alpha isomerase to progesterone. And this is now converted by this enzyme 450C17 and 17-alpha-hydroxylase to 17-hydroxyprogesterone. The hydroxyprogesterone is now, through the action of this enzyme, converted into androstenedione. And the androstenedione is aromatized by 450 aromatase to become estrone. And estrone now is acted upon by 17-beta-hydroxydehydrogenase to be converted into estradiol, which is then secreted mainly into the maternal circulation. Okay, now if we follow the pathway of pregnenolone via the DHEA pathway, but using again the same enzymes of 450C17-17-hydroxylase as is found here, it is converted again into pregnenolone, acted upon by 450C17-20-hydroxylase, converted into the hydroepiandrosterone, converted by your enzyme 3-beta-hydroxydehydrogenase and alpha isomerase into androstenedione. And this androstenedione is aromatized by the human placenta to be converted into estrone and acted upon by 17-beta-dehydrogenase to be converted into estradiol. What do you observe in this graph? That it is necessary that there are centered enzymes so that the precursor cholesterol is converted into pregnenolone. But pregnenolone cannot be converted directly into estradiol because the placenta does not have the enzyme necessary for conversion of this. So it has to go through the process of 340-1720-hydroxylase to convert them into the immediate precursor, which is the hydroepiandrosterone. To explain this better, I know it's a little confusing for you, but please remember that in human trophoblast, neither cholesterol nor progesterone can serve as precursor for estrogen biosynthesis because it does not have the enzyme necessary for conversion of cholesterol and progesterone into the precursor of estrogen secretion. So 17 alpha hydroxylase, 1720 lyase, or CY517 is not expressed in the human placenta. So hindi pwedeng ang cholesterol at progesterone directly maging source ng estrone and estradiol secretion in the placenta. So if that is so, what is the source of placental secretion? Kasi nga, wala sila nitong enzyme na ito. So remember, you have cholesterol converted by 450 to pregnenolone. And because of the enzyme system, 450 and 17 hydroxylase, they can be converted into progesterone. But ang placenta, wala nitong enzyme na ito. Wala silang 17 hydroxylase, 1720 lyase. So CYP17 is not expressed in the human placenta. And so progesterone and cholesterol cannot be the immediate precursor for estrogen synthesis. So what happens now? In human trophoblast, neither cholesterol nor progesterone can serve as precursor for estrogen biosynthesis because 17 alpha hydroxylase, 1720 lyase, or CYP17 is not, I repeat, is not expressed in the human placenta. So if you are asked, is cholesterol and progesterone the immediate precursor for estrogen biosynthesis? I hope your answer is no. And if you are asked why, because CYP17 is not expressed in the human placenta. So what is the source now of estrogen biosynthesis in the human placenta, as you can see here? Okay, you will observe that this is the maternal circulation, this is the placenta, and this is the fetal circulation. Okay, you can see here that LDL cholesterol undergoes cleavage in the fetal adrenal, acted upon by 7 and converted. Okay, LDL cholesterol, CYP17 converts, and sulfotransferase converts your precursor LDL cholesterol to dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate. The dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate is acted upon by the enzyme sulfatase. These are all present in the placenta and acted upon by 3-beta dehydrogenase and then aromatase to 17-beta hydroxydehydrogenase and converted into either estradiol and estriol. Okay, and then it enters now the maternal circulation. Some of the dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate coming from the fetal adrenal. Okay, so ulitin ko uli, the source of LDL cholesterol for placental estrogen synthesis mainly comes from the fetal adrenal. Okay, the fetal adrenal LDL cholesterol is undergoes metabolism by these different enzymes, which I will enumerate for you later, converted into the dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate. So the main source is the fetal adrenal gland of the precursor of fetal estrogen synthesis. Okay, the dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate goes to the placenta, acted upon by sulfatase, 3-beta hydroxydehydrogenase, aromatized into 17-beta hydroxydehydrogenase to be converted into estradiol and released into the maternal circulation. Some of the dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate, which came from the fetal adrenal, now enters the fetal liver, converted and acted upon by 17 alpha hydroxylase in the fetal liver into 16 hydroxydehydroepiandrosterone sulfate and undergoes through the same system of sulfatase and enzyme system to be converted now into estriol by the human placenta. So what does this mean? That the main source of estrogen synthesis by the human placenta is the fetal adrenal gland. Not the maternal adrenal gland, but the fetal adrenal gland, as you can see in this schematic representation. Okay, now, because 17 alpha hydroxylase 70 lyase is not expressed in the human placenta, fetal adrenal dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate is the source for estrogen. I repeat, the fetal adrenal dehydroandrosterone sulfate is the main source of placental estrogen synthesis as you can see here, and converted into warts. I hope that is clear. And some of this dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate passes through the liver and is acted upon by 16-alpha hydroxylase and goes through the process of sulfatase and aromatase conversion to form estriol and released into the maternal circulation. Okay, now you can see therefore now that there are 4 placental enzymes that are necessary for estrogen production in the placenta. Steroid sulfatase, 3-beta-hydroxydehydrogenase, aromatase, and 17-beta-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase. So I repeat, there are 4 placental enzymes that are necessary for estrogen production in the placenta, whether it is estradiol or estriol. Steroid sulfatase, 3-beta-hydroxydehydrogenase, aromatase, and 17-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase. Therefore, please remember this very important message that I am now presenting to you. The most important source of placental estradiol production is the fetal adrenal dehydroandrosterone sulfate. Is this clear to the group? Because this is a very important part of our lecture. That the source of placental estrogen production is not the maternal adrenal gland. The main source of placental estrogen production is the fetal adrenal dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate. And you will compare this now with progesterone production later on. That is why it is very important, if we are to analyze the synthesis of placental estrogen, we must know the function or capacity of the fetal status, okay? Because fetal estrogen production is definitely influenced by the fetal condition, okay? In terms, as you can see, the immediate precursor of placental estradiol secretion is fetal adrenal dehydroepiandrosterone, okay? And in terms of estriol, as you can see, the main source of production is conversion of your dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate to 16-alpha dehydroandrosterone sulfate and is the main source of placental estriol secretion. Okay, so that has been repeated quite often, and therefore you will understand now that there is a relationship between fetal well-being and placental estrogen production. Let us now look at the adrenal gland of the fetus in utero. The fetal adrenal gland, as you can see and have studied in your anatomy and physiology, has a cortical and a medullary portion. And secretion of the cortical adrenal gland are the mineralocorticoids, the glucocorticoids, the androgens, estrogen and progesterone. The catecholamines come from the medullary portion and the peptides, okay? And now let us look at this fetal adrenal gland. Remember that the fetal adrenal gland hormone production has a principal secretory product. So the principal secretory products of the fetal adrenal glands are pregnenolone sulfate and dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate because of its very active steroid sulfotransferase activity. And this fetal adrenal dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate is the main source of estradiol production, of estrogen production in the placenta. Although the fetal adrenal gland secretes also cortisol, it is a minor secretory product because of the low expression of 3-beta-hydroxydehydrogenase in the placenta. So let us now look at knowing now that the main source of placental estrogen synthesis is the fetal adrenal gland. Will fetal conditions affect estrogen production? And the answer is yes. It has been shown that when there is fetal demise or death, fetal anencephaly, kasi walang pituitary gland yung fetus, fetal adrenal hypoplasia, fetal placental sulfatase deficiency, trisomy 21 Down syndrome, or deficiency in fetal cholesterol biosynthesis, and the presence of fetal erythroblastosis can affect the 6 conditions can cause a decrease in estrogen synthesis, and the 7th condition may increase the amount of estrogen synthesis. Are there maternal conditions that affect estrogen production? Okay, and the answer is yes. Because if you give glucocorticoids to the mother who is pregnant, it suppresses pituitary and adrenal gland secretion of the precursors for estrogen synthesis. So suppression caused by glucocorticoid, if there is no normal maternal adrenal function, then there is decrease in estrogen assessment or estrogen synthesis by the placenta, if you have these first two. However, if the maternal ovaries have an androgen-producing tumors, that it increases the precursor and you increase the level of estrogen. If the patient has gestational trophoblastic disease because of the abundance of abnormal trophoblastic cells, the level of estrogen will also rise. So these first two conditions can cause a decrease in estrogen production. The third and fourth can the first two reduces estrogen production by the placental trophoblast. The third and fourth may increase the level of estrogen production in the placental trophoblast because of increased precursors. Question now is asked, where does the abundant secretion of estradiol and estrone from the placenta go? Does it go to the fetal circulation, to the fetus, or does it enter the maternal circulation to be excreted mainly by the maternal liver and kidneys? The answer to that is that more than 90% of estradiol and estriol formed by the syncytial trophoblast enters the maternal plasma. And 85% or more of placental progesterone enters the maternal plasma. Why? Why is the directional secretion of placental steroids towards the maternal circulation and not towards the fetal circulation? Because the hemochorioendothelial presentation is the major reason for directional movement of newly formed steroids into the maternal circulation. Remember that in the lining of the placental membrane, you have the between the maternal blood in the intervillous lake and the fetal blood in the fetal capillaries. You have the level of syncytial trophoblast, then you have chorionic mesoderm, and then you have the fetal capillary wall. So dadaanan, layer ng trophoblast, layer ng chorionic mesoderm, and layer ng fetal capillary wall. So tatlong layer ang dadaanan. Whereas, if it goes directly into the maternal blood, into the intervillous lake, alam naman ninyo na the trophoblast line the maternal intervillous lake. So directly yung pasok ng estrogen and progesterone into the maternal circulation. So the directional flow of placental estrogen and progesterone production is towards the maternal blood directly. The steroids that leave the syncytium do not enter fetal blood directly for the reason of hemochorioendothelial presentation that I have explained. Let me now go in the remaining few minutes on progesterone production. And I will describe to you the process of progesterone synthesis, explain the role of progesterone in pregnancy, and outline the mechanism of progesterone transfer to maternal and fetal blood. Now, this is, of course, as you can see, the daily production is very high until late pregnancy, approximately 250 milligrams daily. Remember, as I said, that in the luteoplacental phase, about after the 8th week, between 7th to the 9th week, placenta trophoblast assumes progesterone secretion, no more the corpus luteum of pregnancy. And before the 8th week, therefore, if you remove the corpus luteum before the 8th week of pregnancy, a spontaneous abortion can occur because you remove the source of progesterone from the corpus luteum that will maintain the placenta. Okay, so the daily production rate of progesterone from the placenta is 250 milligrams per day. Where does progesterone synthesis take place? In the trophoblast. What is the source of trophoblast production of progesterone? Maternal low-density lipoprotein cholesterol. So, in difference to estrogen synthesis, Remember, let me go back. Fetal adrenal gland dehydroepiandrosterone is the main source for placental estrogen synthesis, whereas maternal low-density lipoprotein is the main source of progesterone synthesis by the syncytial trophoblast. Please remember that. The major source of placental progesterone production is maternal low-density lipoprotein cholesterol. Therefore, if the main source of placental production by this placenta is the maternal organism, will fetal condition affect level of progesterone? The answer is no, because the main source of precursor of progesterone production is the maternal LDL. So there is no relationship between fetal well-being and placental progesterone production. As you can see here, again, looking at the luteoplacental shift, as you can see here, by about the 7th to the 8th week of human gestation, the placenta takes over.
At the start of the menstrual cycle,
the placenta takes over the function of the corpus luteum for progesterone production. And actually, that finishes my lecture, and I have a video presentation that I will present to you now.
At the start of the menstrual cycle, a cohort of follicles starts to grow, but generally only one continues to develop. This follicle is referred to as the dominant follicle. In its interior, the follicle contains an immature oocyte. This follicle increases in size by 1 to 2 millimeters per day. The follicle produces estrogen and causes the lining of the uterus, the endometrium, to thicken. Around day 12 to 14 of the cycle, the follicle has grown to the size of about 21 millimeters. The rupture of the follicle ensues, which is called ovulation, and the mature ovule is released. The fallopian tube's fimbriae move towards the ovary and catch the oocyte that stays near the ampullary zone of the tube, waiting to be fertilized. If sexual intercourse occurs, the semen deposited in the vagina starts its ascension into the tube, and the sperm eventually arrive at the oocyte. One of these will succeed in penetrating into the interior of the oocyte. One day following fertilization, a cell with 2 nuclei is observed, at which point in time it is called an embryo, and it begins to divide itself. 2 days after fertilization, the embryo is made up of 2 to 4 cells and moves along the tube in the direction of the uterus. At the end of 4 days, the embryo continues to divide itself, at which point it is called the morula. And the interior of the embryo has an area filled with liquid, and this is called the blastocyst. The blastocyst migrates to the uterus and sheds the surrounding membrane, process of hatching, and the embryo begins to implant in the endometrium of the uterus.